Spectrovision Radio.
Robert Monroe traveled to the future and he discovered something amazing. A man who is famous for having out-of-body experiences and even coining the term out-of-body experiences realized that in the future we have in-body experiences. We completely evolved to the point where our human consciousness no longer needs to come into the physical. Instead, it resides in a place called the dorm, which is a non-physical ring around Earth, but it still enjoys coming into the physical. So instead of us having out-of-body experiences, in the future we have in-body experiences. But he discovered much more than just this. He discovered what the point of existence is, what aliens are, interdimensionals are, and what happens after this human Earth life experience. So today, I'm going to take you to the future, and we're going to hear it from Robert Monroe's own words, what life is like on planet Earth sometime after the year 3000. You guys ready? Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another book report style show. We're going to dive back into Far Journeys, Robert Monroe's second book, and we're going to go to chapter 15, which is called The Promised Land. Now, I probably should have done this video before the last video I did. The last video was about The Gathering, which is chapter 16. And I did that one because it's just one of my favorite chapters, so I just decided to do it. But in that chapter, it mentions some things that we learned in chapter 15. So I thought, hey, let's go back in time to chapter 15 and go to the future. Because in chapter 15, he goes to the future. And it's incredible. And this is by far one of the most interesting and profound chapters in any of his books. And we're just going to dive right in. I'm going to stop to analyze it as I do when we get into kind of the really, sticky parts. Because, if you know Robert Monroe's readings, some of this stuff can get pretty dense and complex, even to the point where throughout this chapter, you'll see that it's even blowing his mind. There's several times where he's just like, I had to let that go because I don't even know how to conceptualize it and how to put it into context in his human Earth life. So let's just dive right in. I don't think at this point I need to really go back and tell y'all who Robert Monroe is and who I am and what we're doing. If you're watching this right now, you probably know those things. If not, go back and watch some old stuff. But let's just dive right in, guys. So chapter 15, Far Journeys, Robert Monroe. We're going to the future, y'all. It starts. This is his in-spec friend talking to him. So his in-spec friend, or these in-spec is short for intelligent species. It's his out-of-body contacts. It's basically these guides, these very intelligent, wise, non-human intelligences that have been guiding him through this whole process. So they say, at this point, we believe you are ready for another awareness. You may now appreciate the prospect of what you are attempting to perform in your present time. It is not to state that you alone may bring into Earth reality such prospect. Yours is but a small part of a whole that may come into being, aided and supported by many others who contribute their small parts just as you are doing. However, with your effort in your present time, you can complete your portion and you can return home, only to return and share in the fruits of what you are propounding when they have matured. These fruits are what we are about to show you. It's super interesting because when they say home, because they've said this a few times through these books, and he never knew what home was. Home to him always just gave him this nostalgic feeling, as home should, but he always just figured home was some other planet, right? Just somewhere out there is home. What we find out in this chapter is bonkers bananas. So please stay with me to the very end because it really is just incredibly fascinating. But what we find out is home is the future. Home is future Earth. We find out that this is really wild, but it's only future because we're in the past. And I know that might sound basic, but the more you think about that, the more profound it is. Their future isn't the actual future. It's just that we are in their past, which means the future has already happened. But what they're doing is they're trying to change some things and create a new future pathway, which would mean that the future that we're on, our future trajectory, is new. It has never happened because we're deviating from the future that has already happened. I know. It scrambles your noggin, but we will get some clarity as we move through this chapter, okay? Robert, their use of the term home brought a surge of nostalgic yearning, and I turned inward and closed. Echoing through me came the fragments of the rote I could never totally express, the serenity, complete feeling of belonging, to recall the vitality I had forgotten, the crisp, warming clarity of, and yet it was not quite right. Something was missing, too deeply hidden, or had I opened. They say, we thought it might be important to you. We can show you this as an observer, not as a participant. Even as I vibrated, I blinked. If they planned it, it must be something big. But I couldn't read them as they did me. They say, we can escort you to a physical Earth possibility at a point in your time measurement beyond the year 3000. The principal inhabitants are what we call H+, human plus, to indicate modifications from those in your present time. As you are now, you will be a visitor. So they're going to the future sometime after year 3000. There's humans there, but they're called H+, because they've been modified. They're not like us, but they are a lineage of humans. Well, so that was it. I had made only a few visits into future time. I would never have the guts to try such a jump by myself, but with them, they say close tightly. It will be better that way. Close means to focus, to kind of turn off external stimuli. He says, my excitement was great and my vibrating reflected it. So I turned inward, folded it all back into a loop and closed. This would be the real rote, not the projections and imaginings of those looking at the small trends, which always click. Remember, click means we're shifting perspectives, shifting consciousnesses, in this case, shifting time perspective. We were high above the earth, much as one would perceive it from halfway to the moon, which was still there behind us. I love how he just nonchalantly, he's like, don't worry, the moon's still there. So all the people that think Earth is flat and the moon is an illusion and all that kind of stuff, just go out of body. Just go out of body and you will see that the Earth is round and you'll see that the moon is there. One way to debunk all that stuff. We were high above the earth. Okay. The earth was the same blue-green color with the white covers of clouds partially obscuring the land below. We moved in steadily, and I was happy to see that the deep gray and brown rings were no longer there, which meant the blockage got cleaned up. He's talking about the rings around Earth. That's what we call the spirit world. So whenever we die and our consciousness goes to spirit world, it's like this loading area, this waiting room for Earth, and they're visible to them in this out-of-body state as these energetic rings around the Earth. So he's saying they're not there anymore. Good. No more repeaters. Repeaters means reincarnation loopers. But it was the new feature that pulled my focus and wouldn't let it go. Around the Earth was a single flat ring, much like the ones around Saturn, and it was radiating and sparkling, not from the reflection of the sun, but from its own internal source. They say, these are the inspec. You will understand fully the meaning of the ring as we progress. Robert, as we moved around, not through, the sparkling ring and headed inward, I became aware of another change. The M-band was full of communication, but no noise. No noise. That could mean only one thing. Man had finally got it together. Further evidence was the lack of the haze M-band noise creates. No more random thought clutter. This at least gave me a beginning percept of what I might expect. Just so you know, the M-band radiation that he talks about a lot in his first two books is the energy that comes from our thoughts, the chatter, the human monkey mind of just constant chatter and thoughts and dreams and emotions and all that kind of stuff. It creates this haze, this energetic haze around the Earth, and it's called M-band radiation. And when you're moving through it in the astral state or out-of-body state, it's very disorientating. It's very chaotic, and they hate it. They can't stand it. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard. So he's noticing that that's gone. All that noise is gone. We came into a low altitude at about 8,000 feet and began circling the Earth over the northern hemisphere, east to west, near a 28-degree latitude just a few miles off the coast of what appeared to be Japan. The seas were soft light green, and gentle swells some 10 feet from trough to crest moved majestically over the surface. Deeper, I could perceive schools of fish leisurely weaving along, not too fast, their track matching neatly the contour of the distant coastline, thousands of them, silver sides flashing as they made their quick changes in direction. There had indeed been changes if they schooled so closely to the shore, so many of them. It was familiar, yet there was a missing element. I scanned the ocean surface and knew immediately what it was. No ships. I reached out along the horizon and far beyond, not even a rowboat or dinghy. I scanned overhead across the sky with its streets of white cumulus clouds. No aircraft. Just gulls in turn, sweeping and searching among the heavy swells, and higher than that, beyond cloud base, nothing. No contrails, no jets. Then we had crossed the coastline and were over Japan. Off to the north was Fujiyama. A white cone glistened in the sun. Below us was a neat carpet of tidy fields and large checkerboard squares, each a subtle shade of green. Correction, much more than greens. Spotted among the green like a gigantic bouquet were clusters of fields, each of a different color. One a massive bright orange, another deep blue, whites, reds. Fields of blooming flowers, bushes, and evidently hybrids of the two. Because no flower could be that large. It was a pattern that could be seen only from high overhead. Yet there were no aircraft, and that began to give me another faint percept. So, really interesting. There's all of these rows and organized, obviously constructed like gardens and stuff like that. But there's no aircraft. So why would they create them in these patterns that can only be seen from above? We'll find out. As we moved west, I became aware of other missing signs. There were no roads, not so much as a lane to service the fields. Also no buildings, no houses, no barns, no sheds. I scanned in all directions and there were none. No cities, no towns, no villages, no power lines, no cars, no trucks, no bicycles. All gone. The air was clean and clear. No smoke or smog. Then I had a flashing percept. There were no people. That was what I was actually looking for. Men, women, children. What terrible catastrophe took them all away? The inspects. They are there. They are fewer in number, but it was not an event that made it so. What you perceive is by design. That's comforting, right? They're not saying that some accident or catastrophe happened. They're saying that this was all designed over time. We began to move more rapidly westward across the unending array of colored bouquets, set in green, some so large they appeared to be many miles in width. And soon we were over water again, the Sea of Japan, as I remembered it, and still no ships on what was once such an important transportation route. Back over land again, the Korean peninsula, and the pattern was different. In every direction were tall and stately trees with close upward turned branches of a species unfamiliar to me. New trees. But again, no sign of human artifact to indicate Kilroy had ever been anywhere near the place. Your percept is, how do you call it, obsolete? They're reminding him that he's thinking in like current modern, ways. Before I had a chance to turn inward on that one, we were over water again, moving even faster and back over land. This would have to be China. Surely with its teeming millions, some had to be visible. Evidently, they didn't have to be at all. We swept over mile after mile of deep green forest, broken only by occasional grass clearings and wide rivers and streams. Where are the rice paddies so vital to human sustenance? They say. There are a few, but for a different purpose. They're bird sanctuaries. That's interesting. The land below became more rugged, and soon we were skimming between the ranges and peaks of very mountainous terrain. Vegetation was sparse, and snowcaps flashed by as we passed at what seemed Mach 2. I would be more comfortable with a little safer altitude. My half-bold pilot experience was coming out. Being half-bold had let me grow old, but not gracefully. The sheer snow-laden rocky side of a high ridge came rushing at us. You can move through it, now the other side. It is different now. The ridge was almost upon us. I closed tight. So he used to be a pilot, or he was a pilot in real life. I closed tightly just as we were about to crash. There was a slight change in the texture around me momentarily, and it was gone. I opened and scanned behind us. The high range was fading in the distance. Passing through physical matter is not yet my habit. Quickly, the earth was beginning to level out again. The color of the forest changed into lighter greens, and the cleared areas became larger. I tried to remember my geography. We were over Middle East, I thought. Yes. There they were coming up, still the rolling, sandy, near desert areas where the oil came from. I scanned in all directions and saw very symmetrical clusters of trees, but no tanks, no pipelines, no pumping wellheads, nothing to indicate man had ever set foot in the area. Either the oil fields were pumped dry or there was no longer a need for oil. They say both percepts are accurate, which is interesting. That means that we had tapped all the resources and we had pumped all the oil. And also, at this point in our evolution, we don't need it. We moved out over water again, Mediterranean Sea, and higher, faster. A scrap of land blinked by underneath, which I could not identify, and more water, heavy trees, heavy waves. This must be the Atlantic. Land again, a sudden slowing, and we landed gently in a field of grass amid rolling hills. I looked around me, wondering why we had stopped at this particular place. It was faintly familiar. I was standing on a knoll in a field of rich green grass whose blades were so even they must have been recently mowed. No, not cut, they were growing evenly. The edge of a woods of oak trees, limbs spreading broadly, rose behind me. In the far distance, a series of ascending green-blue ridges formed giant stair steps upward. Why stop here? Why at this place? It is their wish. They are expecting you. The inspec energy faded and I was alone. I seemed very physical as I stood there. I could feel the sun on my face. Light, cool breezes ruffled my hair. Hair? I wasn't supposed to have hair. They were expecting me? I scanned in all directions, but with no ident. No, there is one. And it's very familiar. Very familiar. Over in the woods. I turned and walked. Walked? That inferred legs. I looked down and indeed have legs. Very normal and very human. Bare legs and bare feet. And I could feel the grass on my toes as I walked. I touched the rest of me as I headed for the large oaks. My body was physically real and warm under my fingers. I glanced down, and it was my body as a beanpole 22-year-old. Ha! No clothes. That's some kind of progress. Now I could feel the soft wind against my body, the air in my lungs as I breathed. It was the first time that I could remember that I experienced a fully operational physical body in this state of consciousness. But I don't see why I had to go all the way back to a skinny 6-foot, 137-pounder. I reached the edge of the woods and started to enter when I ran into a barrier, something that threw me back into the field. I stopped and looked, but my percept showed nothing. The familiar ident I couldn't associate with anything was behind the barrier. So I tried again. It gave me a little, but no more. And the invisible force field itself was familiar, yet I couldn't connect the ident and the barrier. Something was missing. You can stay in the grass and we will join you there. No sound. It was NVC. That means nonverbal communication. We made it. Humans did it. We made the quantum jump from monkey chatter and all that it implied. I was eager to meet the welcoming committee, whoever they were. I didn't have to wait but a moment. A man and a woman came out from under the trees and stood in front of me. At least that nice polarity hadn't changed. Both appeared to be in their late 20s, attractive, well-formed, skin a suntan color, the man's hair light brown, the woman's dark. They smiled as I inspected them. So basically what he's saying through this whole thing is that they landed somewhere in like this nice field in these blue type mountains. We'll get to that in a minute. And he couldn't, like, when he says ident, that's like his way to like consciously identify something. And he was saying, I couldn't get any idents. I don't know who's here, what's going on. And then he had one familiar ident, and it was behind this like force field. And we come to find out that that's actually AA. And AA is, I don't want to be a spoiler here, but I kind of have to for any of this to make sense. AA is a part of Robert Monroe's, what he calls the I there, which is like his higher self. And that the reason AA is behind this force field type thing is because there are certain things that they have to keep compartmentalized so that doesn't create these like butterfly type effects in Robert's journey. Because right now this is past Robert in the future, and there's other parts of Robert there. That's what the I there cluster is. It's these like partitions of his higher self that are there as guides helping him. So many of these, what we call inspects, he finds out later are parts of his I there. So they're actually parts of him. They're future versions of Robert Monroe that are going back in time to help Robert Monroe. And we'll find out why. Super duper interesting. But that's why one of them is kind of quarantined behind this force field because they can't. It's like if your future self came back and met you face to face, it would mess up some stuff. So there are certain things they have to keep compartmentalized. So, I open. Well, I guess we haven't changed as much as I thought we would. Not physically, anyways. He's like scanning their bodies and saying, hey, we look like we do now. Sorry about the mix-up, Ram, the band rolled. Your host forgot about the barrier, so we're taking his place. So basically, AA wanted to meet with Robert, but basically they figured out that, or he remembered that I can't, so these other people are kind of, as surrogates, are sort of talking to Robert, but like passing along AA's thoughts. So, and they call him Ram, which is his initials, Robert A. Monroe. So that just means that's what AA calls him. Anyways. So they're telling him that they're taking his place. I blinked. You must know me well with that Ram stuff. The man warmed. Yeah. And you're sure a familiar one to me. The ident is fuzzy. The way it comes out, I know it's not right. The man vibrated and rolled. Not in 1,000 years would you believe it. It's more than 1,000, so now you better believe it. I had a bright flashing percept and I didn't believe it. BB? BB rolled. Who else? BB is another one of his close, inspec friends. Like he's one of his like main guides. It's kind of he's like a playful personality, consciousness, but it's part of Robert Monroe's eye there. But Robert Monroe doesn't know that at this point in the story. He doesn't know that these entities, these intelligences that are helping him are actually parts of him. He doesn't know that yet. He thinks they're aliens. So BB rolls. Rolls mean laugh. BB laughs. Who else? I turned inward and found the rotes. I had percepts on the barrier. Rote is like a download. It's a ball of information. Percepts is like a instinct. On the barrier, where it had repelled me before, and I knew who my host was to have been. That's AA back in the trees. BB opened wide. He was sure eager to meet you in person. He was so eager he forgot about the barrier, but he's getting percepts. Does he know what the barrier is? BB smooth. Yeah, he knows, but he told me, you have to find out for yourself. I turned to the woman, no longer able to resist the enormous pull she unknowingly or knowingly was exerting upon me. Her smile told me it was the former, but she was closed tightly, and I respected the signal. Like BB's, her ident was strong, far stronger, but it was fuzzy. How could I forget such a vital, important... Her smile was mischievous. You don't... Well, what do you want to know first? This is her talking. BB cut in. I could run you my rote, but it might not be what you want. I turned to BB. Exactly what year is it? Year? Oh, time. Well, they gave up that kind of measurement after they reached the 3,000 mark. Didn't need it anymore. What next? I flickered. Where are we? I know from the way we traveled on our approach that we made it just inside the United States, near the coastline. BB smoothed. AA thought this is where you'd like to come first. Not the United States any longer. No states. No countries. Anywhere. We don't need them. But you ought to get a percept on this particular place. I turned and scanned around me. It was familiar. The knoll where we were standing, the rising tiers of blue-tinted ridges to the west. Blue ridges? The percept was total. How many times before had I stood on this very knoll and looked to the west? Had made the stairway of rounded hills my launching chute. The flood of living human experience I had attached to this spot. This site. The houses, fences, buildings, roads, all were gone. The lake was still there. And the trees, so many more trees and of varieties I'd never seen before. And to the east, there was water. Water, where once was a 4-lane highway. Water stretching off into the horizon. We call it Virginia Bay for old time's sake. Part of the ocean. BB was very smooth. You always yelled about the law of change. Some of us hibe here for old time's sake. Okay, real quick before we go on to the hibe. Essentially where they are is they are at the Monroe Institute. They're at the Monroe Institute in the year 3000 something. So there's no buildings or anything like that. But he's saying, I'm standing on this knoll looking out over the Blue Ridge Mountains like I've done so many times before. And the crazy thing is I've been to the Monroe Institute and I've stood at the same knoll. It's where the crystal is now. And when you look out, I have a picture. Actually, it's when you go to my website, it's the main picture on my website of me standing by this giant rose quartz crystal on this knoll looking out over the Blue Ridge Mountains. And it's something I'll never forget. And when we went up the mountain to the top of the mountain, the Institute's at the bottom, but his house, his log cabin's at the top of the mountain. That's where we stayed. And so you're way up there. And waking up in the morning and going out and having my coffee on the balcony and looking out from Robert's house. We're in Robert's house and looking out over the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'll never forget it. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And they are blue. And that's where they are right now. But in the year 3000 something. But then he also says that he looks out and he's like, where there used to be a 4-lane highway is water. And they call it Virginia Bay for old time's sake. But it means that that's water. And he says it's part of the ocean. So all that stuff we talked about in my 2050 remote view in the future video, this is lining up with that too, that the water comes in. Because I looked at it on a map and there is a 4-lane highway right outside of the Monroe Institute, not far at all. And if the water made it all the way there, you're talking a good 100 miles or so inland. The ocean comes. So I'm about 100 yards from the ocean right now. Not awesome. Okay. Then they talk about this. It's so fascinating, y'all. Okay. So he says, you yelled about the law of change. Some of us hibe here for old time's sake. Robert says, I blanked. Hibe? Hibe? The woman opened ever so slightly. We store our favorite human bodies here under the oak trees until we need them, which is not too often. I turned inward. Hibe. Hibernation. Sure. Why not? Simply a vast improvement on the old OOBE pattern. But to leave it lying around under an oak tree? We put a super reball around it. The woman responded, smiling. It's so tight not even a virus can get through, so certainly it won't be bothered by ticks, mosquitoes, or anything larger. The rote was building fast. Reball, short for resonant energy balloon. which we were clumsily trying to generate with mixed success, an energy field around the body to shield and protect back when. And there are still ticks, mosquitoes, viruses, and bears, no doubt. BB grinned. No doubt at all. I looked at him. What did you mean, not too often? BB swung to the woman. You tell him. Okay, before we get into that, this is so freaking interesting because they say reball. Okay, so when you learn Gateway, when you go through the Monroe Institute training, one of the main things that we do is we create something called a reball. And it's a resonant energy ball. And it's just you're creating this energetic force field around your body. And it's what keeps us safe when we're doing our astral travels. Because when you're going out there and you're traveling in different dimensions, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff, it's like running into the jungle and not expecting to see life forms. You're going to see strange life forms. So whenever you go out in the astral and you're going through different dimensions and stuff, I mean, yeah, there's intelligences and consciousnesses and entities and all sorts of stuff. And, not that they're like bad or evil or mean or anything, but, you're in their world. It's kind of like if someone just busted in your house, it's like, well, you got to do what you got to do. So sometimes you're busting in these people's houses and you got to protect yourself. And one of the things we do is we create what's called a reball. Well, this is where he got the knowledge by visiting the future, is where he got the knowledge to put that in the Monroe training. So as we're going through the Gateway training, we're learning how to create these reballs around us. And this is where that comes from, because in the future, the reball is this like energetic force field that keeps these bodies safe. So what they say is that they place human bodies underneath trees in these protective cocoons, these energy reballs, and they can enter into them whenever they want. Kind of like the same way we rent a jet ski and go have some fun or rent a car. They can hop into these bodies, and the bodies are safe under these trees because they have a reball around them. And that reball is what we learn to do at the Monroe Institute. It's so interesting. And so interesting that this is where he got that inspiration and knowledge to create the reball. So, where was I? BB grinned. What do you mean, not too often? He swung to the woman. You tell him. The woman opened somewhat wider, and I could feel the attractive radiation diminish, and I knew it was deliberate. I also was sure she knew I would not attempt any further percept of her if that was the way she wanted it. At least that hadn't changed. Women still like to be mysterious. Not too often is about twice a week, more or less. She smoothed, watching my reaction. She got one. I blinked. All three of us here in human physical form on the same day is quite unusual, she went on, enjoying every moment of this. We did it just to meet you. I smiled. I appreciate it. Believe me. Remember how you used to say... She laughed, then started again. You were always saying we are more than our physical bodies. Now it's the other way around. We keep telling the new ones they are more than their energy selves. I turned inward. This was more than I'd ever contemplated, but one thing hadn't changed. One answer led to 100 other questions. So I think that's so cool. So he always says we're more than our physical bodies. And she's saying that we're always trying to remind people that they're more than their energetic bodies, that you have this ability to go into the physical. You want your usual baseline. Well, we are still human beings, or beings being human, I guess. This is her talking. She looked at BB, who simply shrugged. That was unusual. A must have instructed him to let the woman do the talking. Correction, communicating. I tried another direction. On the way in, I didn't see a single house or building, no roads, nothing to show that man was here or ever had been. No cities, factories, aircraft, cars. How come? BB laughed. You didn't look very hard. The woman glowed. Isn't it beautiful? I was smoothing more. I can understand how you can sleep under the trees in weather like this, but how about winter? You still have to keep warm. The reball takes care of that, she answered. It keeps an air temperature layer all around us, all around the physical, just whatever you want it to be. How about food? You have to eat. She held out her arms in front of her body, level with her shoulders, palms upward. She closed her eyes and stood quietly. After a few moments, she lowered her arms, opened her eyes again. That gives this body enough energy for at least a week. She sighed contently. So basically, it's all mental. It's all mental. I flickered. You mean you don't get to taste food anymore? Real food? Oh, that? Sure. BB got into the act again. He reached down, scooped up a handful of red loam from between the grass roots. What do you have, wild rice? That's my favorite. I watched, fascinated. Decided to go with the game. No, Silver Queen. BB blinked. Silver Queen? What kind of... Here, I'll do it. The woman took the dirt from BB, cupped it in her right hand, and stared at it intently. The dirt began to bubble and boil, changing color, reformed into a small, full-kerneled, mature ear of white corn. She handed it to me, and I took it. It was hot to the touch. I carefully put it up to my mouth, took a bite. It was Silver Queen, the sweetest corn I'd ever tasted, with the freshness of just being picked. It even had melted butter. No, oleo dripping from it. I looked at the woman as I chewed avidly. She smiled knowingly. If she kept leaking percepts, I'd have her ident whether I wanted to or not, and she wouldn't have her secret. I handed her the corn, and she bit into it. We both chewed and tasted. So basically, they can just mentally create, manifest. I mean, it's like that they just have this reality figured out to the point where they know, like, how things work. You know what I mean? Like, they know that you don't have to, grow food. You don't have to, like, buy food and make food. You don't have to, like, have fire in house and stuff like that to keep, like, that this earth has everything that you need, and that through your mental ability to be able to kind of edit and manipulate, physical matter reality, which is exactly what we learned through the Monroe Institute. It's what we learned through when I did the 2 Gateway reports. It's what we learned through, even like Tom Campbell's teachings and all that kind of stuff, that in a sense, this is like a virtual type reality, and that there are like set definite laws of nature and laws of physics and that kind of stuff. But there's so many probabilities and possibilities within there that we have direct control over. And we can regulate things like weather, our temperature. We can produce food. We can heal. We can do all sorts of things with our thoughts. And here in the future, year 3000 and something, they just have things just so figured out, you know what I mean? That all that kind of stuff is just so basic to them, like it's just how they operate. Like, it's no big deal. To us, it would seem like magic. How did you just make a corn like that and eat it, But to them, they're like, well, that's how we eat. That's just how this place works. Just like, I don't know, if I were to show a cell phone to somebody, if I went back in time 200 years and showed them an iPhone, they would freak out and think it was witchcraft or magic. These people are so far in the future that they're just like, yeah, this is just how it works. It's normal and natural to them. I swallowed, wondering where the corn went when I did so. It didn't matter, so I smoothed. All right, you've convinced me. What about no roads, no transportation? Suppose we wanted to go to Japan. That's not within walking distance. BB grinned. Why, we just pull a skip, that's all. Short version, of course. Why Japan? A skip to them when they're in the astral. A skip it's like a rubber band. So say you want to go somewhere. Say you're in an out-of-body state and you want to go, I don't know, to another planet or somewhere far away. What they call pulling a skip is they basically imagine the place that they want to go to, like far off in the distance, right? And you almost imagine like pulling back like on a rubber band, and you pull back to where you are here. And when you let go, you there. You see what I'm saying? So you just instantly just like fly there. And they call it pulling a skip. So that's what he's talking about when he's like, well, what if we wanted to go to Japan? How do we go there? And he's like, you just pull a skip, but just, a short version, because you're not going that far, like going around Earth is nothing, because they're so used to going like traveling astrally, right? So if you just want to go from one country to another, he's like, yeah, that's just a bloop, piece of cake. So he said, why Japan? I noticed some very unusual patterns of growing things there when we came in. The woman smiled. It's very lovely, isn't it? First stop, Japan. BB turned toward the woods, and the woman followed. We'll be right back. I watched as they disappeared into the grove of oaks. I stood there waiting, mulling over the strange mixture of physical and other energies that was now Earth life. I found I was unable to determine where one began and the other left off. There was no longer a sharp dividing line. Was it all like this? Already, I turned and there was BB and the woman standing beside me. They seemed different, lighter. Well, we had to drop off the bodies. So they had to go and put their bodies back under those, in the pods under the trees. Because now they're going to go pull a skip. And, they can't do that in the physical. So there are certain things you do in the physical. Like you go in the physical because you're like, okay, I want to go down to Earth and I want to like eat some yummy food. And I want to play and I want to swim in the ocean, climb a tree, get it on with somebody, something like that. Like fun human things, right? But like being in a human body has physical limitations. So when they want to do other things, they have to go drop off the body so that they can go do non-physical things, right? So now they've dropped off the body and they say, I suddenly remembered. No tricks, BB. BB rolled. No chance. She's handling the ident. You and I just play follow the leader after her. So there's following the lady. I focused intently on BB and stretched. Click! We were hovering over a rolling landscape at about 10,000 feet. Directly below us was what seemed to be the center of a lotus blossom, the outermost petals and the magnificent glowing colors spreading out in all directions for 5 or 6 miles. Beyond these were descending tones of greens from the very light of a fresh new leaf to the rich dark of the lower tropical rainforest. She and BB were beside me. So think about this. So they just pulled a skip. So now they're in an out of body state and they're above Japan. And he said he wanted to go to Japan because when they were flying in at the very beginning, he noticed some cool patterns and stuff. So they're saying that directly below us, what seemed to be the center of a lotus blossom, the outermost petals in magnificent glowing colors spreading out in all directions for 5 or 6 miles. So imagine looking down and there's like a arrangement of essentially flowers and plants that is 5 to 6 miles in diameter that is in this like formation. So you get this impression that they're just playing. Like Earth to them is like a garden. They're gardening. Like they're up. What we find out next that these spirits exist in what's called the dorm, which is like this astral state. It's like the spirit world above and around Earth. So it's like they come down to Earth to play, to have fun, and Earth is like their garden. So they're like creating these manicured, forests and rows of trees and plants and flowers and all this stuff and all these arrangements and everything just for aesthetic purposes. It doesn't really serve a purpose. They did say that they repurposed the rice paddies for bird sanctuaries, which is super interesting. But in general, you get the impression that these are just human consciousnesses that no longer have to come into the physical, but they do just to do things like this, to have fun, to plant like gardens and to make pretty things so that when they're up, they can look down and just see it. Same reason we have art and stuff in our house because we like to see it. It's pretty. So that part hasn't changed. So the woman vibrated. This is one of the nicest. I could see why. I opened. Who did this? A group who wanted the area to give a percept of the beauty that began here. It was in existence when I came. Now others just take care of it. So he's asking who made this big lotus flower garden thing. And she's saying that a group that just wanted, like a Japanese group, obviously, that just, even though they're in the non-physical at this point, in the future. So it's in their past, but it would be our future. These people are like, okay, well, even though we're in the non-physical and we don't need to be on Earth, we want to create this huge lotus garden thing just as a remembrance of our culture and stuff. So she's saying that it was in existence when she got there, and now others just take care of it. I got a clean percept. The rest of the world, the Earth, was it all like this? It had been restored to its original ecological balance, the way it was before humans upset it so severely. It's all back together again. Every tree, every plant, every animal, all of it. Plus a few improvements, BB put in. But it's not all laid out in huge gardens such as this. I focused on the woman. Only a small part. She came back. The rest is made up of forests, woodlands, pastures, and prairies. Even the desert areas have been restored. My percept had been quite clear. Humans had taken over Mother Nature's work, with a few improvements. I didn't need to ask the hows of it. The road of the woman converting dirt into an ear of fresh sweet corn said it all. If a human could do that, I had to complete it. I was sure of the answer before I asked. Suppose we wanted to walk around down there. I mean, in a physical body. I smoothed carefully. How could we do it? The woman vibrated. I'm sure there are any number of bodies under those beautiful cherry blossoms. I pressed. We each could take over one just like that? She says, yes, of course. I had to know. Suppose they all were already occupied, so to speak. BB couldn't stay out of it. We'd make some new ones. Doesn't take long. You want to go down? I flickered. No, not yet anyways. But what about the physical bodies you left under the oak trees? Can just anyone occupy those if they want to? BB rolled. Sure, why not? Why not? That took some fast adjustment. Then I pulled out the rope from back when, where others had occupied the physical bodies of our volunteers in the laboratory, communicated verbally, activated other portions of said body, including playing the piano, all without any wear or tear or concern. Why not? So during the Explorer series, when he had his elite Explorer team, they would go into the out of body, and he was the monitor, and he's kind of, guiding them through these experiences. A lot of times they would encounter an intelligence, and the intelligence would want to occupy their body, because the intelligence is non-physical, and sometimes non-physical entities want to be physical for a minute. And in one of the parts, they actually played the piano. The non-physical entity played the piano at the Monroe Institute. So what he's saying is that, like, he's asking them if, okay, well, y'all just left your bodies, under those oak trees. So what if some other consciousness wanted to hop in those bodies? And they're like, yeah, who cares? It'd be like someone borrowing your car to run up to the store. And then makes Robert Monroe think, oh, yeah, when we were doing the Explorer stuff back at the Monroe Institute, we would meet a non-physical intelligence, and they would commandeer our body. They would take over, and they would either communicate through us, like channeling, or they would like express themselves and do stuff like write. That's how we get a lot of our like really creative stuff. How like people will say, I don't even know where the inspiration for this book or this movie or this song or whatever came from. It seems like a lot of these non-physical entities are sort of using us as their vehicle for joyriding to come into this physical, reality for little bits of time and do stuff, just like in the future they do with these bodies. So it just kind of makes Robert Monroe, starting to like make his gears turn and start to put these pieces together. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it's pretty crazy when you think about it, that, people talk about the human body being just a vessel or just a vehicle, or a container. You're like, a vehicle for what? A container for what? And it's a container for consciousness, So right now it's our consciousness that's in our body, but in the future, the consciousnesses exist outside the body, and they just use these bodies for just vehicles, for just hopping in and having fun, and then, hopping out, just a very temporary thing. The woman was smoothed at BB. I don't get the percept he's ready. Sure he is, BB came back. He's a big boy now. It would give him the whole rote in one gulp. Have so much fun, it would blow him away. Let's go back to the dorm first, as AA planned. She came back easily. Then maybe we'll go from there. I opened. Do I have a choice in this? She rolled. Of course you do. I smoothed, holding back the vibration. Let's do what she indicates. I've had too much experience with your fun, BB. No offense. BB rolled. Sure. The woman turned to me. Close tightly. I did. Click. So basically they're arguing. BB is saying to the lady, she's like, hey, let's just take, Robert to this. Let's click to this one part and we can just show him the whole thing and that'll answer all of his questions. And she's basically saying, I don't know if he's ready. So she's like, let's go to the dorm first. And then BB's like, kind of, well, I don't know. I think we should do this thing. And Robert Monroe's like, yeah, I don't trust you, BB. I'm going to go with the lady. She seems a little more sensible. So they clicked. Now they're going to the dorm. This is so cool. We were floating amid thousands upon thousands of white sparkling forms, each animated and vibrating. At first, the brightness and radiation was so overwhelming, I was sure I would have to push the panic button or scream for my inspec friend. Then it lessened, and I felt the warm sense of understanding entering from all external points of me. I knew the forms had deliberately diverted their radiation, whatever it was, away from me, so it conformed to my level of tolerance. I wondered how I must ident to them. Probably a dull gray piece of fog. So all of a sudden he's in this place, and there's these bright glowing forms, beings, and he can tell that they're like reducing their radiation, their glow, to not harm him. And he's asking, I wonder what I look like to them. And he's like, they're these bright, majestic, glowing beings. I probably look like a dull piece of gray fog, because he doesn't think he's too evolved. Welcome to the dorm of the renovated Superhuman School of Compressed Learning. The ident was BB, no mistaking that. AA decided dorm was the best term to use. I have no percept of what a dorm is. That's BB talking. So this is how they introduce him to this place. Welcome to the dorm of the renovated Superhuman School of Compressed Learning. That's pretty cool. So they call it a dorm because they consider this a school. A renovated school, which means it's gone through some sort of a renovation, some sort of a overhaul. Superhuman school, which is telling you right there that this is no longer your normal human school. Like this is this evolved version in the future. And then it says compressed learning. Compressed learning. I mean, there's no faster way to learn than the duality and the intensity of planet Earth with the food chain and everything. Welcome to the dorm of the renovated Superhuman School of Compressed Learning. I love that. I caught the smooth yet vague ident of the woman on the other side of me. She was bright and sparkling exactly as all the others. I knew she was human, or did I? So, must be all the other sparkling forms. I opened as much as I could. What's this place? You passed it when you entered Earth. As she sent it to me, I immediately got the flash of the sparkling ring. This is our reference point until we decide to... She trailed off and closed. I tried to smooth. Decide to do what? She opened slightly. Graduate? I let the rest of that one slip for a moment. What do you do in the meantime? She rolled lightly. Well, for one, we make and gather. What did you call it? Loosh? Like honeybees? Or Guernsey cows? Only now we know what we're doing and why, and we're happy to do it. Okay. This brings together so many things because she basically says that this ring that they're in, like when they, remember at the beginning, whenever they're flying in, he said that, okay, there's no more of that in-band, radiation, that waiting area for the returning souls, the reincarnation loop, the spirit world that we're so familiar with, that was all gone, and so was the noise, and that was good. And then he noticed that there was just this one sparkling ring around the outside, and that's where they're at now. That's what the dorm is. So, and then she talks about the Loosh. She's basically saying, he's like, what are y'all doing here? And she's like, well, we're waiting to graduate. He's like, okay, what do you do in the meantime? And she said, well, one of the things we do is we we like to, what'd you say? We make and gather Loosh. So she says, only now we know what we're doing and why, and we're happy to do it. So many people argue about, is Loosh good or bad? Is Loosh evil? All this kind of stuff. And I think at this point in our development, we just don't understand. We know it's a thing. We know that Loosh is this energetic byproduct that's given off when biological entities, biological creatures have any sort of an emotional reaction. So whether it's fear or love or joy or curiosity or adventure, all these things put off an energy. And that energy can be collected and used as some sort of a fuel. And we look at it as bad. Ooh, bad because fear puts off energy. So we're being manipulated by, archonic entities to generate fear Loosh, and they're parasitically harvesting it and blah, blah, blah. But in the future, what they're saying is that now that they understand what Loosh is and why and what their role is, they're happy to do all this because they understand how it works. It's the creative fuel for creation in the universe. It's how we even can exist. It's why there's an earth and why there's human beings and why there's consciousness. Everything has to have fuel, and this is the fuel. So it's not bad, and it's not even necessarily good. It just is. And now they understand how it works, and they're happy to do it. That's one of the things that they do. That's one of their activities. Robert says, I turned inward and closed. This one I did understand, but the vastness of the change was near unbelievable. I was here, and the evidence was all around me. The interstate to freedom. I opened again. What else do you do? She lighted smoothly. Experience Earth consciousness. Not just in physical human form. Remember, we could only feel part of it, just a part. Now we go through it completely from the smallest unicellular life up, millions of different life cycles, most of which we were unaware of as only physical human form. Even the physical Earth itself has an active consciousness. I let that one go by too because I couldn't resist a follow-up. The natural food chain process, it still exists and you experience it from beginning to end? She came back gently. It's an important part of the learning process. We couldn't make Loosh without it. So she's saying that another thing that they do is they experience consciousness at every level. So down to unicellular life, all the way up to, being humans and even experience Earth itself, because Earth, Gaia, has its own consciousness. So she's saying that now, like when you were a human, you just experienced human life and human consciousness. She's saying now they can go and experience every single kind of life. And he asked, okay, well, does the food chain still exist, right? Like, do things still have to eat other things? And she said, essentially, yes, that's part of the Loosh production process and that it's also part of the learning process. That is a very important part of it. And it makes you wonder, okay, why? Why would an intelligent creator have to do this? Wouldn't there be a better way to learn? And the answer is, like, when it comes to animals, like we think about, you see like a lion eating a gazelle and you're just like, we feel bad for that gazelle. We're like, oh my God, that poor gazelle. We got to think about it from their point of view. It is a game. Their consciousness isn't at the same point as ours is, okay? So human consciousness has the ability to derive meaning, and we even have like future anxiety and stuff like that. So we look at it like, oh my God, like that gazelle can't, like live out his life and provide for his young gazelle family and all these things. So we think about it like when a human dies, we're like, oh my God, their kids aren't going to have a parent, or, maybe they had like tasks they hadn't completed in life, or they only made it to a certain age and they're supposed to make it at this age or whatever. Animals don't think that way. Animals just have the experience. They understand that there's a chain. They understand that there's things above them, things below them. They understand all these things. They have experience. A lot of them are like kind of in a hive mind kind of a thing. They share consciousness. And then when their life is terminated, they just go back up into the flow. And then at a certain point, they come back around. And they don't look at it with the same self-identity that we do. Like we look at everything as like very, very severe and very like, like this is the beginning, this is the end. They look at it like it's just a flow. So it's like when you're playing a video game, and you're playing the game, you're very invested, you're doing really good, you're far on a level and you die. You're not like, why did this happen to me? And go into a deep depression, right? What do? You respawn and you play again, That's it. And I think that most life on Earth operates with that mentality, except humans, because we've got to this point of like intellectual development where we can think so deeply on stuff, but we don't know the full story. So imagine somebody who's really freaking smart, like humans are really, really smart, but we only know half of the information. The rest we're guessing on. And it's that guessing, that extrapolating out, that kind of future anxiety, those kinds of things, which kind of cloud our judgment and make us think that things are different or more severe or evil in nature or these kinds of things because we're guessing, we're filling in the gaps because we're really, really smart, but we don't have all the information. Animals don't do that. They just are. They exist. They play the game. They play their role. They have the experience. And then when they're done, they go back up into the flow and come back around. Humans don't do that, but not yet, I say, because it seems like in the future they do. So, BB says, "Hey, Ram, some change, huh? No more haze, no more M-band noise, no more locked-in rings? Want me to show you around?" I turned to the woman, but she didn't respond, so I took that to mean it was all right. Also, she had closed. Evidently, she wanted to keep her secret, and with a little more of her ident leaking, she wouldn't have any secret. So something about this woman, she doesn't want to give up too much. She's trying to stay secretive and mysterious. I'm thinking it's because she's another part of Robert. I followed BB. Lead on, old buddy. We moved easily through the sparkling forms, and I hooked onto BB's ident to keep from getting lost. I could feel the radiation ease back in front of me, providing a pathway, so to speak, of low-level energy that I could tolerate. I was surprised when, passing various forms, a spark would fly out and touch me. In the sparks were spoken words that I heard very clearly. "Hello, Bob. Hi, Robert." But I couldn't get an ident on any of them. Finally, BB stopped. In front of us was the first entry station. It appeared much the same. There was a large cluster of gray forms hovering around it. So the entry station is where, earlier in the book, he goes back to the first time that he came into human form, and you go to the entry station. And there's a guy there named Ed, which just means entry director, and he is the one who finds out why you're here, what you're wanting, and then places you into. It was like a whole system. It was like kind of getting onto a bus and like you're at the terminal at the station. It's a lot like that. So that's where they're at now. So BB says, "Lots of changes. You wouldn't notice them if you didn't know any better." I ventured, "Such as?" "Heavy cutback on the survival imprint, for one." BB rolled. "You remember that lecture you gave me, complete with living illustrations and the old rings? You'd be amazed at the difference that one change made." I opened. "I am." BB blanked, then went on. "Yeah, well, another thing is a solid pre-briefing and training before entry, especially as to continuing contact during physical sleep cycles." Oh, I love this part. Okay. What they're saying here is, so basically the first part, he's telling them that, "Hey, remember that one time you told me that this would help in this process?" They instituted that and it made a big difference, which means that Robert Monroe's experiences, his training, his visiting all these realms, because in the out-of-body state, he goes to all these realms that normally you can only go to when you are like dead, right? And then you just kind of, there's a system and you go through it. But since he's still attached to a physical body, he could go to these places, these parts of the spirit world and observe from a, kind of a third party point of view, because he's not dead, he's still alive. So it'd be like visiting a school, but you're not a student. You can just watch and observe how that school runs. That's what he was doing. And when he did that, he made some adjustments unknowingly, just because he was observing things. And he was like, wouldn't it make more sense if we did this? And they actually instituted those and it helped. Another big change that they made, which is so freaking awesome, is that he says, oh yeah, another thing is a solid pre-briefing and training before entry, especially as to continuing contact during physical sleep cycles. So that means that before his, kind of consultation, his 2 cents, before that, they did not do a solid pre-briefing and training before entry. So before that, if you just wanted to come to Earth, say you're a consciousness, you're out there in the universe, and you heard about Earth, or you see this place, and you're kind of drawn to it, and you're like, huh, what are you guys doing down there? That looks kind of interesting. It looks kind of fun. I want to play. You could go to the entry station. You could talk to Ed, the entry director, and you could say, hey, I just want to come in and play. And they'd be like, all right, have fun. You got to sign a contract. I'll do a whole review on this chapter, but it walks you through the whole process of, there literally is this like contract that you sign that talks about how you're going to have this memory wipe. You have to agree that there's a physical matter reality. You have to agree to the laws of nature and laws of physics. You have to agree to forget everything that you were before, all this stuff. It's really crazy, but you could do it. And then you could actually have just one sojourn and then go on your way. There was no law that said you had to keep coming back, but people get addicted because it's kind of addicting in here. So, but they didn't give you a pre-briefing or a training. That's what he's saying here, is that they added a solid pre-briefing and training before entry, especially as to continuing contact during physical sleep cycles, which means they added a part in that contract which says, it makes you think that before the contract said, You go in there and you're on your own. You're completely cut off from your higher self, from your soul family, from any, external non-physical, communication or help. But then they added into the contract continuing contact during physical sleep cycles, which means that, okay, you're going to go in there. You're not going to remember that you were a consciousness or a life form before this. You're not going to remember past lives. You're not going to remember that you were an intelligence before you came to physical earth life reality, that you were something before human. You're not going to remember any of that. You're going to be deaf, dumb, and blind so you can focus on this sojourn in this life. But in your sleep, you will have continuing contact with your non-physical counterparts in your sleep. That's why sleep is so crazy and important. So that's super interesting that they put all that in there based on Robert Monroe's kind of, I don't know, his, whatever you want to call it, consultation, right? I blanked. But you don't even sleep here, do you? No, don't need to. Then he lighted. Oh yeah, that's the other point. These first-timers go back before the changes as their first entry point. Some of them almost back to when humans first began being human. They take one human physical life cycle, and only one, and come back here and join in. No repeaters, just one-timers. I turned inward, then open. Is this one-timer pattern going on back where I came from? BB lighted. Oh, sure. I flickered. I haven't had a percept of that taking place. BB smoothed. Sure you have. I blinked. How? That last outer ring, remember? Didn't come near the repeater department, just went up and faded out. I flickered again. But they were the ones going home. BB vibrated triumphantly. Well, I turned inward and closed. The whole thing was getting out of hand, or better, out of my mindset, beyond my ability to absorb and understand instantly. So this is so cool. Whenever Robert Monroe was exploring the rings, and he realized that there's all these inner rings that is part of our reincarnation loop. You come in, you die, you go back up, you learn your lessons, you have your past life review, you plan your next sojourn, you come back in. And that's the reincarnation cycle. He's going and going. Those are the inner rings. But there was always this one ring around the outside that was called the one-timers ring. And it was separate. It didn't really interact or interfere. It wasn't influenced or anything by the other rings. And he was always told that those people have one lifetime and then they go home. So he always thought he called it the last timers, because he thought, okay, they must be about to graduate. They've already done the inner rings and now they're on that last one. They're about to graduate. It's like your senior year. What they're telling him here is that no, that's not it at all. That's the one-timers. That's not the last timers. It's the one-timers. And that they come in for one physical lifetime. So say, okay, we're in the future here. It's year 3000 something. Say some consciousness from somewhere else, right? It's never been human before. And it's like, oh, look, Earth, I heard about this place. This looks like fun. And it comes down to the dorm. And they're like, hey, what's up? What are you doing here? They're like, oh, I want to go be human. And they're like, well, you can't just go down there because we have this place freaking pristine, okay? Like everything's dialed in. It's very safe. It's like a utopia. And the intelligence or the consciousness is like, well, I want to do it. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, you're going to go back in time and you're going to have an experience and you're going to understand what being a human is. And you're going to have all these, like crazy shit happen, right? Like you're going to, that's what human life does. It teaches you things. It teaches you empathy, teaches you cause and effect. It teaches you, severity, that kind of stuff. Because when you come in, say you're put into a really traumatic lifetime, you're all of a sudden going to experience so much emotion in one lifetime. You're going, oh my God. And then when you go back to the future, into the dorm, then you'll have this like new understanding and new appreciation. And you'll be like, okay, like I went to Earth back in the day and it was fucking nuts. And now I'm here and it's gorgeous and beautiful and it's like peaceful and utopia. And now you've had this but you've only gone once, right? So you didn't have enough times to go, you didn't go through the incarnation cycle and get way down with karma and like too distorted by all the craziness of Earth. There's just once. It just, you went in, dipped out just to get that feeling. And then they feel like they can trust you to be on Earth now because you've had that like training. So he finds out now that that's what what he called the last timers ring is actually called the one timers ring. They just go back for one. They keep them separated from all the other rings so that they in no way can be influenced by or pulled into that, because they're just going back for one sojourn, one human life, and then they're going to go back to the future. And that future is what they've been calling home this whole time. So whenever he was like meeting with these people and stuff in the past book and earlier in this book, and they're like, yeah, we're going home, he never knew what home was. He thought home was some other planet. Home is the future. It's the future of Earth. Pretty freaking crazy, isn't it? So that's what they're saying here is like, he says, These first-timers go back before the changes as their first entry point. Some of them almost back when humans first began being human. They take one human physical life cycle and one only and come back here and join in. No repeaters, just one-timers. Pretty cool, huh? Okay. So, come on, Ram, he vibrated. Let's live it up. Let's have some fun. I flickered. Fun? Well, I don't know. Your idea of fun. Just usual stuff, I guarantee it. Things we do every day down there. Also, I got a hard rote from AA as to what to show you and what not to. I scanned beyond the gray forms around the entry station and into the sparkling lights beyond. Where's AA now? I never get a good ident on him. BB indicated, behind us. He's back there. That barrier thing won't let him come closer. But I bet he's going to follow us. You ready? Just a short skip, that's all. I felt much more confident with that small percept. I reached out and stretched, holding onto his ident. Click. Okay, so I'm not going to read all this because they go in, and it's super fascinating. I would encourage y'all to read it. But they go into, at this point, BB is going to take him on all these adventures where they're going to put their consciousnesses into everything. I mean, they become a cloud. Anything that allows consciousness, and that's most things on Earth, they become a cloud. He gets to experience what it's like to be a cloud, a hurricane. He gets to experience, they go in, he's a tree at one point. He's fish, he's birds, he's some sort of a big cat, like a cheetah or something. All of these different things. And he gets to experience it. And it's like playing a game. It's like literally like he gets to jack into this being and see it from their point of view. It's like putting on a VR headset. And he gets to experience all of these different life forms on Earth. And they come to find out that that's one of the big purposes. That's what they're doing in the future. So right now, our consciousness comes into these human avatars, and we have these human lives. And we're kind of stuck in this reincarnation loop. We don't have too much control over it because we're kind of just stuck in this loop. But in the future, they have total control over it. And they exist in the non-physical, but they can come down to Earth and they can just jack into any of these avatars that they want, whether it's a tree or a cloud or, Earth itself, and you can experience that from that point of view. And it's just, you're gaining knowledge and information and kind of leveling up your consciousness the entire time. But it's like several pages of all these different adventures and different beings. And it's super fascinating, but I don't want to read all of it because it would take an hour. And we're almost done here. You're hanging in there. Good job, guys. It gets even better. But this is the very end. There's just 2 pages. So after all this, the very last one, they're a bird. He's like a falcon or something, doing crazy tricks. And then click. I was back in among the sparkling forms and I closed tightly. The radiation was making me break out in waves, exquisitely familiar. After a moment, the radiation lessened and I opened. I had ident immediately on BB and the vague ident of the woman. BB rolled. That big old bird must be wondering how his wings got bent. I rolled with him. Oh no, there wasn't one strained tendon or muscle, not one feather out of line when I left, I guarantee it. BB turned to the woman, a sparkling form I already had ident on her. He's your problem. I'll check with the AA and see you at the site. I turned to the woman. The site? That's where we first greeted you. I turned inward. There were so many points left unanswered, and I had a percept that my visit was growing short. Get to the key items. Those first. I focused, completely open, so nothing would be distorted. The first-timers. When they come back, one-timers, she corrected me. I went on. If you have that constant input, you must have an output to keep the flow, the movement active. She waited quietly, politely. Or had she percept of both questions and answers? I went on. So humans, do you graduate from here, the dorm? Question, what happens to the graduates? She flickered. I don't have a percept of that. They just click out. One at a time or as a group? She smoothed. Usually several at once. Every so often one goes alone. And they never return? No, they don't. Any communication with them after they leave? She flickered. Not in a way that we can understand. I wanted to follow up on that one, but I was sure it would come out. Any indications or symptoms they're about to graduate? She smoothed again. Oh yes, they no longer need to experience Earth, so they begin to go physical less and less. Finally, they stop completely. Is that all? No, their radiation begins to change, and they begin to close. After that, they click out. I had the percept she was beginning to vibrate. I don't want to act like an inquisitor, but she opened more. Go on, we expect you to ask just what you are. I took another direction. I needed as much of a road as I can get. I may not get another chance. She smoothed neatly, but there was little roll in her response. Oh, I'm sure you will. In time-space, I went on. Are there many other growth patterns in consciousness similar to humans and Earth? She rolled. You can't count them if you wanted to. There's that many. And new ones coming online constantly. I flickered. Online? She rolled stronger. Knew you would like it if I used that phrase. I went with it. I'd like to meet this AA face-to-face sometime. He knows more about me than I do myself. She didn't respond, but laughed strongly. I didn't think it was that funny. But humans are now in he says, but are humans now in communication with other such civilizations? She smoothed out. Not very much. There is some exchange, but it doesn't seem necessary or important. What about other non-physical energy systems? She lighted. Oh, those? We visit them as often as we can. I threw a high, hard one. To gather Loosh? She turned inward and then opened carefully. No, to sow it. To plant the seeds. That lets the ray have an ident to focus on. Now I was the one who turned and closed. Her simple statement implied so much knowledge that made everything else no more than sophisticated monkey chatter. There was much monkey left in me, too. Too much. But I had a sudden percept, and I knew I had to verify it. So, real quick. Holy cow. He says, are humans now in communication with other... Oh, he says first. Are there many other growth patterns in consciousness similar to humans and Earth? So he's saying, are there other physical, humans or physical, what we'd call aliens, okay? Are there other physical beings and Earth-type things out in the universe? And she said, you can't count them all if you wanted to. There's that many. And new ones coming online constantly, which means in this vast universe, she's saying, without a doubt, there are so many inhabitable planets and so many intelligent beings like humans that you could never count them, with more coming online every single second. So that answers that question. Yes, aliens, what we'd call aliens, exist in abundance in the universe. And then he says, are humans now in communication with other such civilizations? She says, not very much. There is some exchange, but it doesn't seem necessary or important. That means that there's a vast amount, it's a cosmic zoo out there, of physical intelligences on physical planets in the universe. And that humans are in some communication with them, but it's not important or necessary. So it doesn't happen that much. But then he asks, what about other non-physical energy systems? And she says, oh, those? We visit them as often as we can. So this goes back to what Robert Monroe always talks about. The non-physical world is base level reality. The non-physical world is the most important part. So yes, you can physically go to other places in the universe and see other physical beings. But just like we're learning in this, once you get to a certain point of like consciousness evolution and development, being in the physical is no longer that important or necessary or even, fun. You can do so much more in the non-physical. So you come into the physical to do certain things, but it's a smaller part of your life and of importance. So what she's basically saying is, yeah, there's all sorts of planets out there with all sorts of physical beings, but we don't really spend too much time, interacting with them or exploring them. The real important part and the real interesting part are all of the non-physical dimensions and realities. That's the important part, and that's where they spend their time. So I think that's very, very fascinating. And then he says, to gather Loosh, about visiting all of these non-physical dimensions. And she says, no, to sow it, to plant the seeds. That lets the ray have an ident to focus on. The ray is the emitter. That's source. He gets into that, sorry, spoiler alert, in the third book, when he visits the emitter, and the emitter is the ray. It's the ray of all conscious energy. It's like this projector beam, this laser that actually puts in the initial consciousness light into the universe. So she's saying that they go to these other, non-physical energy systems to sow seeds that then the emitter has the ability to interact with. So creating more life forms, essentially. So he says, are you about to graduate? She flickered. Yes. How do you know this? She vibrated. He told me you'd ask the question, but you didn't ask it right, so I can't answer it. I didn't have to ask who the he was. This is AA. But you gave me you didn't have a percept what happened to graduates. She smoothed nicely. I don't, but you do. I blanked completely. Did she or Inspecs have it that I would do the informing, a boy to do a man's job? I was so close, I almost missed the rest of it. She was vibrating warmly. We've been expecting this, an event to take place. Then we can leave. I was ready to ask about who the we was in the event, but I felt the familiar Inspect signal and began to respond. And so did she. So did she. A great flood of percept ran through me, and I had all the answers, I thought. We have to go back to the site now. She was smooth yet vibrating. Are you ready? I closed. I didn't. The knoll reached and stretched. And then essentially they go back to the knoll back at the Monroe Institute. But that last part is so intriguing. And also the part that like he has to ask her questions. So it's really interesting because you know how like, okay, we have AI now and I can ask AI any question I want and it'll give me like extremely good answers, but it won't just tell me things. I have to ask it. And even when we're dealing with like our higher self, you know, I learned how to directly interface with my higher self at the Monroe Institute, and with my wife, we do a lot of higher self hypnosis type things, and it works amazingly well. And you can connect to your higher self, what Robert Monroe calls the I there. You can connect, and you can ask questions, and you can get answers, but it rarely will just tell you things. And even through this whole book, this 3-book trilogy, when he's meeting with his idents, who are different parts of his I there cluster, and they know a lot, he has to ask them questions and they'll answer the questions, but he also has to ask them the right way. And it's really interesting because he asks her a very specific question and she says, ooh, you didn't ask it the right way, so I can't answer. So it's all about protecting our free will and them not impeding on our free will, because this is a developmental school. This is a school of compressed learning, and we're here to learn. And if they tell us too much, then it interferes with the learning process, which would negate the entire purpose of this reality. So they're very careful not to ever impede on your free will. So that's why your higher self and your guides won't just come in and tell you things. It's like you wouldn't tell your kid all the answers to the test, because what would be the point of going to school? So I think it's really interesting that they know so much more than they can tell, but he has to like get to the point of like spiritual and intellectual and development where he's asking the right questions so they can give the right answers. So I think that's really interesting. So basically he asks her if she's about to graduate and she says yes. And he says, what happens then? And she's like, I don't know. And then she tells him, but you do. Essentially saying, you know what happens next. And we're waiting on you to come and tell us. And this is where it gets really fascinating, because in the 3rd book, he does what's called the run on the interstate. And the run on the interstate is his way of going to basically the edge of what's called the TSI, the time-space illusion, and the edge of the universe in the non-physical world, where he goes to the aperture and the emitter. It's like a white star and a black star, and or a white hole and a black hole. I mean, and one is the projector shooting out consciousness in the stream, and then it like rolls in this like vortex and comes back into the black hole, into the other side, and you're returning to the absolute. We went over this in my 2-part about the analysis and assessment of the gateway process, but it's really, really interesting. So he went to all that. And in doing so, on this run on the interstate, he discovered and learned all these things, like what happens when they click out, what happens next, what the point of everything is. And she's telling him at this point that, they don't even know in the future, year 3000, whatever, what happens, but he does. And this is where it gets really trippy, because what that means is that they are going back in time to him. They're helping him now. They're his guides now to help him to go and do this run on the interstate, so that they, as a whole, as a collective, because everything he learns and does feeds to their collective, so that they can then figure out what happens next and they can click out. So for them to click out in the future, they had to go back in time and start editing and changing their own lifetimes and putting them on different trajectories and that kind of stuff to feed that information back to the I there, and then they'll get the answer in the future. What this tells me is that there's something very peculiar about the current state of the human being, the fact that they, in the future, can't go down to Earth, hop into one of those bodies in those pods, and do what Robert Monroe did in the 1980s and 90s. That there's something about how the human body is now that gives us this connection to source, this connection to their side, these abilities to do things that they couldn't do in the past, and it doesn't seem like they can do in the future. There has to be a reason why they chose him at this time to do these things, because here they're telling him that he's going to be the one that gives them this information. And in the next book, we find out that they're basically saying, you are the best chance we've ever had. They tell him that. He's had thousands of lifetimes, and they're like, you right now is the best chance we've ever had to reach what's called escape velocity and be able to lift off and escape out of the gravitational pull, the energetic pull, and the karmic, cycle of Earth. So there's something special about humans right now that seems to change at some point in the future. And I think that's why there's 8 billion of us here, the most there ever has been and probably the most there ever will be. And there's so much attention. The last episode was all about the gathering and how there's literally thousands of different life forms and extraterrestrials and interdimensionals and future humans and all sorts of different forms that are around Earth right now watching us, studying us. And it really seems like there's something very special about the human being in this form right now. And I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but we've evolved to this point, and it seems like something changes in the future. So right now, in this time, we're kind of a big deal. So anyways, let me know what you thought of this. Holy cow. I mean, we just went to the future. We saw Earth in the future. And how cool is that? Instead of having out-of-body experiences, you have in-body experiences. You can come down from the dorm and just joyride in these bodies and then go back up. It's really cool. It kind of gives us a glimpse into where all this is headed, and what like the evolution of the human being. Like right now we're human beings, but in the future we are beings that can be human. And it flips the whole thing around. How fascinating, guys. Thank you for listening and spending your day with me. As we did another book report. Let me know what you guys think about this. Drop a comment. Please like and share and do all those fun things. And we'll keep this rolling. People seem to be liking this, and there's plenty of mind-blowing. I mean, we've just scratched the surface, guys. I tell you, it's wild. Anyways, please leave me a comment. Let me know what you guys think about this. Have a beautiful day. Love you all. Peace.